It's official. Am I Racist, the #1 documentary of the decade, is now submitted for an Academy Award. That's right, it's submitted. So it's pretty much a done deal, right? You can only watch Am I Racist with a Daily Wire Plus membership. Don't have one? Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code Trump for 47% off today. President Trump is staffing his administration fast. Who made the cut? Who's setting the policy? Who's deporting all of those? We have at least some of the answers. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. Thanksgiving is coming. I know at least some, really many of you are planning to be that uncle at Thanksgiving dinner. Well, an MSNBC host is racking his brain to figure out how to deal with you at Thanksgiving, how to deal with family members who voted for Trump. How do you deal? Well, one way to deal with economic uncertainty is to consider diversifying with Birch Gold. Text Knowles to 989898. For those of us holding our breath over the past several months, we can now exhale. Work can finally be done on the major issues this country is facing, one of the most significant of which is our national debt. The fact is, our nation is broke, and that debt is a house of cards that cannot quickly be dismantled. For as long as the economy sits atop that house of cards, the strategy remains the same. Diversify your savings. There are so many things out there, out of our control, out of our president's control. That is why you want a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. Best news, does not cost you a penny out of pocket. It only takes the removal of one card for the whole house of cards to fall. Protect your savings with gold. Text Knowles to 989898. Get your free info kit. Plus, right now through Black Friday, you will receive a free 1-ounce Silver Eagle for every $5,000 purchased. As the exclusive gold partner of the Daily Wire for the past 8 years, you can trust Birch Gold, as I do, to protect your savings. Text Knowles, KNWLES, to 989898 today. That is Knowles. I'll tell you, I've been pretty happy to have a good portion of my portfolio in gold over the past several weeks and months. You can get more info. Text Knowles to 989898 today. President Trump is moving fast to staff this administration, and the top roles are being filled, it seems, several per day. The most exciting one, I think, came to us yesterday afternoon, and that would be the border czar. You know, for Biden, Kamala Harris has been the border czar, even though she denied being the border czar because we've had the worst border crisis in our history on her watch after she was given presidential authority from Joe Biden. So there are a lot of eyes on the border. President Trump has picked a guy named Tom Homan. He is the former director of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Mr. Homan went viral about 5 years ago during his tenure as ICE director for this exchange with one of the more insufferable Democrat members of Congress. That would be Pramila Jayapal.
Please respect the chair's authority. The
I respect the chair's authority, but the chair...
Mr. Homan!
You work for me. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a taxpayer. You work for me.
The witness will suspend.
That is exactly the guy I want handling the deportations. I don't know much of anything else about Tom Homan. I know he worked under Trump. It seemed good. Immigration was good under Trump. But even if I didn't know any of that, that's the guy I want handling the deportations. The deportations are going to be very difficult. And they're going to be very difficult because the left is going to focus a giant spotlight every single day to try to expose or even just contrive, even make up out of thin air, heart-wrenching stories about poor dreamers who have come here for a better life, innocent grandmothers whose worst crime was baking pies for the neighbors, and how they're being heartlessly deported by that evil Mr. Trump. Even if 99.99, forget about that. Even if 100% of the deportations are face-tattooed, Satan-worshipping MS-13 gang members, serial killers, and rapists, even if that is all the deportations, you know that the left is going to gin up a bunch of stories about the poor, innocent, illegal aliens who just came to America to look for a better life, to expand their cartel, to, to try to hang a shingle on their mom and pop human trafficking network. And so they're going to make this seem politically totally unacceptable. You need a guy who is tough as nails to handle that. You need a guy who's not going to be easily manipulated by Democrat members of Congress or Democrats in the press. You need a guy who looks at Pramila Jayapal and says, hey, I'm a taxpayer. You work for me. Don't you bang your gavel at me. You don't put that gavel down. That gavel's not going to shut me up. You work for me. Don't you talk to me that way. That's the guy you need in the office. Really, really good pick. I love it. Can we get him to do other jobs in the administration? I don't know, maybe he can be a rotating Secretary of State. I don't know. Maybe he could be DOD, maybe. I don't know. He's good. Now, we have other picks. The UN ambassador has been selected, Elise Stefanik. Elise Stefanik is a Republican member of Congress in New York who has defended Trump on many occasions. Not the most right-wing member of Congress, doesn't have the highest conservative review score. However, I don't think that really matters in this case. I'll get through the other picks and then explain why I think even some of the more moderate or more centrist Republicans ideologically are actually not such a bad pick for some of these jobs. Lee Zeldin, another New York Republican, has been tapped to head the EPA. Stephen Miller, who came to fame for his staunch immigration restrictionist stance, he is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. He is one of those who is pretty right-wing. He's a pretty rock-ribbed kind of guy in the admin. Representative Mike Waltz, another more moderate, more liberal Republican member of Congress, has been tapped for the National Security Advisor. And then there's a rumor, I don't think this has been formally announced yet, but there's a rumor that Marco Rubio is getting Secretary of State. So what do I think about these picks? Some of you are not going to be as familiar with all of these names. Let's start with Elise, because, as I mentioned, Elise is not the most rock-ribbed, right-wing, to the right of Genghis Khan kind of Republican. So is that a bad pick, therefore, for her to be at the UN? I don't think so. I think it's actually a very smart pick. But let's not forget, Donald Trump picked Nikki Haley to be the UN ambassador during his first term. Nikki Haley, also a more moderate, more centrist kind of Republican, and she did a great job there. Because the UN ambassador doesn't have any say over controversial domestic policies where the moderates and the conservatives are always at loggerheads. The UN ambassador basically just has to be a real tough guy, has to be loyal to Trump, has to raise her hand defiantly in New York. And so at least Stefanik can do that well. And it's a position that's based in New York, so I guess it makes sense to pick a New York Republican. I don't know, she's good. And she's demonstrated real loyalty to President Trump on the crucial matters when it counts. Not always on every single vote in Congress, but when the Democrats are coming after Trump, when they're unjustly impeaching Trump, Elise Stefanik has exercised very, very good judgment. And so I think this is a great role for her. Same thing, Lee Zeldin. Lee Zeldin was on this show not that long ago, a few weeks ago. He's been tapped to head the EPA. Lee Zeldin, another New York Republican, not totally focused on the social issues, but a real fiscal hawk. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. If you want someone to help to reform the EPA, if you want someone to bring a more conservative view to the EPA, probably it makes sense to pick a guy who's reliable on deregulation. We didn't elect Trump so that he could add bureaucrats to the EPA who can create many, many more regulations. We want to reduce those regulations because the libs use the threat of climate change and the sun monster destroying the whole world to take away many of our rights and traditions and ways of life. So you want a deregulator there. I think Lee Zeldin's a great pick for that. Then you get down to Stephen Miller. This is good. This is where you're going to need a little bit more of an ideologically thorough sort of fellow here, because he's Deputy Chief of Staff. He's one of the top figures in the White House, touching lots of different aspects of policy, not just fighting with diplomats at the UN, not just deregulating at the EPA, but you're going to touch a lot of stuff. And we know immigration is going to be a top policy. It's one of the reasons Trump was elected, both in 2016 and in 2024, because mass deportations, believe it or not, is a popular political issue, at least according to polls. We'll see what happens when they're actually put into practice. But as of right now, that's a major policy. So you're going to want an immigration hardliner in that position. You're going to want a restrictionist in that position. Good stuff we got with Stephen Miller. Now, how about Representative Mike Waltz for the NSA? Of the names I've mentioned, Mike Waltz is probably the most liberal Republican member of Congress to be tapped. He's got a more moderate record. There's no question about it. But here again, we're talking about the National Security Advisor. Do I care particularly that Representative Mike Waltz voted for the, what did they call it? It's not the Defense of Marriage Act. It was like the slightly more Republican Equality Act. I forget, the name of it totally escapes me. But it was a liberalizing act. It was a law for the Republicans to have their own version of a pro-LGBT law. It was not good law. It was certainly not conservative. Mike Waltz was one of 45, 46 Republicans who voted for that. Okay, he's the National Security Director. What do I care about that? His view on a controversial domestic policy matter has absolutely nothing to do with national security and his performance in that role as NSA. If anything, it seems to me that's a good pick. We're now focusing on a real strength where he's really in line with the Trump agenda, where he's really in line with the conservatives. To me, that makes sense. Now, how about Marco Rubio for Secretary of State? You have three options for Secretary of State. Trump had previously said Pompeo is not going to be in the administration. That was his former Secretary of State. And he said that Nikki Haley is not going to be in the administration. She, I think, was probably looking at that Secretary of State position and would have liked it. Well, they're both out. So who are the candidates? Bill Hagerty was floated, Rick Grinnell was floated, and Marco Rubio was floated. Now, I like all of those guys. I like Pompeo and Haley too. But for the three that were actually up for it this time, Bill Hagerty is my senator in Tennessee. He was Trump's ambassador to Japan. He did a very good job. He's more of a business Republican, which can be very good. It was very helpful negotiating trade deals, and it could be very good in a diplomatic role. I thought Bill Hagerty would be a really good choice. Rick Grinnell, obviously former acting DNI for Trump, very, very close to Trump, former ambassador to Germany, has a really, really solid pedigree in diplomacy. He could have been a very good choice, very loyal to Trump. And then Marco Rubio. Of the three, Marco Rubio probably has a more thoroughgoing kind of conservatism in as much as he has embraced certain aspects of the new right. He's inclined himself toward things like family policy, toward a little bit more of a social conservatism. So in that way, I guess he would be the more right-wing figure. But again, I think any of these guys would have been good choices in state. So here you can't really go wrong. There's no outlier candidate where I think, oh no, I really hope that person does not end up in state. We'll wait to see if that becomes official. But so far, this is a really, really great aspect of Trump's political skill. Trump recognizes that politics is the art of inclusion. It's bringing in people who don't agree on everything, who have disparate views, conservatives. You get 100 conservatives into a room, you're going to get 100 different types of conservatism. They're all going to find the one thing they disagree on. But here it seems to me that Trump is picking people who are loyal, who have demonstrated good judgment in the partisan fights, and crucially, he's playing to their strengths. He's playing to their strengths in a way that's going to bring a lot of conservatives together behind them. So far, I think, so good. Now, I need to tell you about the Daily Wire shop, what we got going on over there. Go to dailywire.com/shop. Are you tired of big corporations pushing their progressive agenda? The Daily Wire shop is your conservative Christmas gift headquarters. Gifts for your family, the perfect stocking stuffers, gifts for your church friends and your work friends, hot items for holiday gift exchanges for under $30. Notably in the shop, my best-selling party game, Yes or No, and its highly sought-after expansion packs. You can also get Do the Work merch from Matt Walsh's #1 documentary, Am I Racist? You can put facts over feelings with the Ben Shapiro Facts collection. You can share the thrill of Andrew Klavan's Cameron Winter Mystery Series. Plus, you can score up to 40% off and grab exclusive holiday bundles. Get ahead on your list at dailywire.com/shop today. Speaking of swapping out personnel, the libs are terrified right now because the Republicans have unified government. Republicans have officially held the House. We've flipped the Senate. We have the White House. And because of Trump's excellent Supreme Court picks, we have a conservative Supreme Court, even though sometimes the conservatives go squishy. Justice Gorsuch enshrines transgenderism into our civil rights law in the Bostock case. That's not good. Or John Roberts is a swing vote. He upheld Obamacare. So it's a conservative court, but it's a little bit shaky. I wouldn't mind another vote or two to make our conservative majority not just 5 or 6, but 7 or 8. Well, some Democrats are really, really fearful that that might happen. So they are calling on left-wing Justice Sotomayor to step down before Trump enters into office, which would allow the still Democrat Senate to install a left-wing justice on the order of Ketanji Jackson or Sonia Sotomayor, a very left-wing justice. And that way, Trump won't have a chance to shift the balance of the court even more. So NBC asks Bernie Sanders, one of the most far-left members of the U.S. Senate, what he thinks about this plan. And Bernie gives a surprising answer.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about the Supreme Court. Some Democrats behind the scenes quietly talking about the possibility, should Justice Sotomayor step down, to allow President Biden to appoint someone who's younger. She's only 70 years old. Is that something that you would support? Do you think she should step down?
No, I don't.
Have you heard any talk of this?
A little bit, yes. I don't think it's a sensible approach.
And you don't think it's a sensible approach?
Correct.
All right.
Since when is Bernie Sanders a man of few words? This is a man beaten down by a Tuesday landslide. So what do you think? This reminds me of the coverage in 2016, 2 months after the election. Here's one weird way Bernie might still win the election. No, I'm not going to win. It is over. We have totally lost. Just what do you think about this plan? Do you think that Sotomayor should step down? No. You've heard about it, though. Yeah. But you think it's bad? Correct. I, for one, not that Bernie's listening to my opinion, not that Chuck Schumer's listening to my opinion, or Sonia Sotomayor for that matter. I think it would be a great idea for Democrats right now to pressure Sotomayor to step down. And then for her to step down, and for Joe Biden to pick a really far left-wing Supreme Court nominee. Look, they still got, what is it? It's November, so you got December into a little bit of January. You got 2 months to ram this nominee through. So I think it would be great. You get that far-left nominee who believes all sorts of crazy stuff after a landslide election that gave Republicans unified government with a bare majority in the U.S. Senate for the Democrats, and then try to get that nominee through, please. Please. Oh, boy, would I love that. Because then you could have Joe Manchin come out. He's not running for re-election. He's out. He's out in 2 months. Get that Joe Manchin over there to see if he wants to vote for that far-left nominee. How about Kyrsten Sinema? She's out, too. Let's get Kyrsten Sinema. Does she want to vote for that far-left nominee? Who knows? I don't know. Get Angus King. Get any of the Dems or independents who caucus with Dems to see if they're going to vote. You have to pry off like 2 votes. And then what would happen? Then the nominee would go down. It'd be kind of close because the Democrats nuked the filibuster on most judicial nominees. And then in response, the Republicans nuked the filibuster on the Supreme Court nominees. So you no longer need 60 votes. All you need is a bare majority. But the Democrats only have a bare majority, and they got at least a couple people, 2 or 3, who are not going to go for far leftism and who got the message from Tuesday. So then in that situation, you have Sotomayor steps down. Biden can't get his Supreme Court nominee through the Senate. The Supreme Court nominee goes down in flames. And then Trump comes into office. First thing he does is replaces Sotomayor. Sounds great to me. Where do I sign up? I thought that we couldn't win any more decisively than we did last Tuesday. But if we get what the Democrats are calling for here, we could have a 7-seat conservative majority on the court with a couple squishes in there, but whatever. I'll take it. I'll take it, baby. Ooh, man. That might actually get me tired of winning. I don't think there's a limit, But that would be so astounding. Some Democrats, unlike NBC, are getting a little bit more serious. They're getting a little bit more introspective. People like Chris Murphy, Democrat senator from Connecticut, who had this to say about the election.
So Tuesday was a cataclysm. Let's not kid ourselves. An electoral map wipeout. In the Senate, our effective ceiling for Democrats is now 52 seats. The ceiling for Republicans is 62 seats. That's unacceptable. And, well, nobody has all the answers right now. I certainly don't. What I think is most important is that we not kid ourselves. This is not a moment for small changes or reforms. This is a moment for a fundamental rebuild of the left. Just a couple decades ago, we could win races in Missouri and Florida and Ohio. Today, we get clobbered in all of those states. That's unsustainable for us and for this country. So here are a few thoughts that I have at the outset about the conversation we need to be having. First of all, we are not listening to the people we claim to represent. We claim to be the party of the working class, the party of poor people. And yet we let interest groups and think tanks tell us what those people need.
He's sitting there, if you're just listening, he's got his baseball cap on. He's got his hoodie. It looks like it's drizzling. This is the dark night of the soul here for Chris Murphy. Oh boy. What happened? What a cataclysm. What a horrible, horrible night. We claim to be the party of the poor, but we're the party of limousine liberals. We're the party of the rich. And they all wiped us out. States we used to be competitive in, we're losing. What are we going to do? What does Chris Murphy say we should do? We'll get to that in 1 second. First, though, if you've not heard, Am I Racist is the #1 documentary of the decade, and it's now officially submitted for an Academy Award. Okay, and that, it's kind of like being nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. It's an honor just to be nominated. But who knows? We'll see. Look, in a shocking year like this, would anyone really be surprised if Matt Walsh won the Oscar for Best Performance in a trollish movie? You can, at the very least, see the movie right now, DailyWire Plus. Use code TRUMP. We will take 47% off with your new annual membership. With that, you will get access to the movie, to a special deleted scene that didn't make it to theaters, to bonus behind-the-scenes footage showing how we pulled off one of the great trolls in history. But the only way to watch this Academy Award-submitted movie is with a DailyWire Plus membership. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code TRUMP. Get 47% off your new annual membership today. Chris Murphy, really upset. Tuesday was a cataclysm. It's a complete disaster. He says Democrats need to make a firm break with neoliberalism. Democrats need to become the party of the poor again and speak to working class economic interests. That's the only way that they're going to be competitive in the Rust Belt. It's the only way they're going to be competitive in others, plenty of other states. Neoliberalism, the global free trade regime, it's all the tax cuts, it's all served the plutocrats, and it's alienated the Democrat base, what used to be the Democrat base. And this has been going on really since Bill Clinton. So they got their work cut out for them. That's Chris Murphy's view. Okay. There were plenty of critiques of neoliberalism. There were plenty of critiques of free trade and markets. President Trump has made many of those critiques. He ran on tariffs, just as Abraham Lincoln ran on tariffs in the early days of the Republican Party, and it worked. So sure, Chris Murphy and the Democrats are willing to take down the economic order of neoliberalism. Okay. Is he willing to limit migration too? That's a big part of it. That's a big part of this globalist neoliberal regime is these open borders. A lot of the anxiety felt by working class Americans, even because of their economic interests, because mass migration cuts wages for the working class. But even beyond that, it also creates all sorts of social disorder and introduces crime to communities and creates problems of assimilation. So, okay, you're willing to raise taxes and limit trade. Okay, Chris, that's great. Are you willing to cut migration? Are you willing to close up the border? Are you willing to cut it out with all the weird LGBT stuff? That's another one of those limousine liberal issues. They want all the LGBT stuff. They want to your kids. Ordinary Americans don't want their kids to be. Don't want weird pride parades with people wearing leather harnesses in Main Street. That's another component of neoliberalism. What is neoliberalism? It's a word that's bandied about and means many things to many people. It's a term that came about in the early to mid 20th century to refer to a return to markets, to a return to deregulation, to try to give new life. It really took off in the Reagan administration, some decades after it was introduced, to breathe new life into markets and deregulation. Okay. Well, part of deregulation has been the radical social policies that pushed the LGBT LMNOP agenda. A lot of working class Americans, ordinary Americans, guys in the Rust Belt, people who have left the liberals, left the Democrat Party to become part of the MAGA coalition, they don't want the trans stuff. The trans stuff is a big issue for them. Are you willing to give that up, Chris Murphy? The Democrats talk a good game here. I don't think they're really going to do it. I think that the political realignment is a little bit more enduring. As Chris Murphy says, Democrats have a lot of sticks and carrots to stick by their liberal, wealthy donors. You sometimes hear this criticism of the right. Oh, the right talks a good game on family policy, but are they really going to help working families? Are they really going to disregard their big donors? Are they really going to institute tariffs, for instance, which would be tough for big corporations? Are they really going to do this? Are they really going to do that? I don't know. Trump seems to be demonstrating willingness to shake things up, and he's won politically as a result of that. Are Democrats really going to? They're not going to give up open borders. They're not going to give up the weird LGBT stuff. They're probably not going to even give up the economic order that serves their donors' interests. So Chris Murphy is going to keep crying in the rain, whining about how they lose elections, and if it keeps up, they're going to keep losing elections. Now, speaking of this realignment, President Trump, it is now reported, won some 50,000 votes from Muslim towns that voted for Biden in 2020. We're talking about Michigan, which is now a rather Muslim state as a result of the mass migration that the Democrats have pushed. Okay, the Democrats brought them all in, but then Trump won 50,000 votes from them in places that voted for Biden. Arab American voters may well have pushed Trump over the finish line. More than 100,000 Michigan voters picked uncommitted instead of Biden during the Democrat primary, and then Trump won Michigan in the general by 80,618 votes. That's with 95% of the vote counted thus far, because the Arabs didn't want to vote for Kamala Harris for maybe a number of reasons, but probably because of the Biden-Harris administration's handling of the Gaza war. So a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads. They're going to say, how is it that Trump, who is the most pro-Israel president that we have ever had, by a long shot, Israel has a town named after him. How is it that the most pro-Israel candidate got all these Arab and Muslim votes? The answer is because politics is the art of inclusion. It is the art of the possible. It is the art of the second best. It's not just that Trump appealed, as the Democrats say, to some base passions that are totally irrational in voters. He appealed to bigotry and hatred. That's what the Democrats say. No. It was rational for the Arabs and the Muslims to vote for Trump. There would not be a war in Gaza today if Trump had remained president after 2020. There just wouldn't be. Hamas would not have attacked on October 7th. Israel would not have had justification to invade Gaza. Hezbollah would not have kicked off in the north as it has. Iran would not have the cash and resources and political freedom to create problems in the Middle East. It just wouldn't have happened. My evidence of this is that President Trump brought peace to the Middle East. He brought us the Abraham Accords, and the world was at relative peace when he was president. So if you're an Arab, you say, okay, the guy really supports Israel. I don't really support Israel, but things were peaceful when he was president. The countries that I do support, maybe family members even that I have over in these countries, their lives were better when Trump was president, when he was leading the global empire. Maybe we should go back to him. Under Harris and Biden, the instability has gotten so bad that many, many Arabs and Muslims have been killed. Maybe we need a new course. That's how you get. I was at the Trump MSG rally, and I see a guy in a yarmulke waving a giant Israel flag, and then not far away from him, I see a woman in an abaya or a niqab. I don't remember exactly how full the facial coverings were, but you think, how are these two people go together? Because Trump can bring those kinds of people together. You think about the staffing of the administration. He can bring together Republicans who are not necessarily the most rock-ribbed, the most religious right, the most socially conservative, but he can put them in positions where they'll really shine, where it doesn't really matter, where it's not going to irk the extreme right-wingers. And furthermore, he can put the real rock-ribbed right-wingers into positions where it's not necessarily going to irk the more moderate wing of the party. He's done a good job at taking over the Republican Party, which he did successfully over 16, 17 candidates in 2016, and then of expanding the Republican Party to include a lot of voters who are not voting down ticket for other Republicans and who had not voted for Republicans before. So what are the Democrats going to do? They can ditch neoliberalism, as Chris Murphy suggests, or they can ditch their families, as MSNBC's Jonathan Capehart suggests.
The thing that I'm grappling with is that someone was elected who ran a campaign that was openly hostile, openly racist, xenophobic, misogynistic, transphobic, everything. And yet now the election's over. Folks accept the results, but now how do we move forward when we know there are people have people in their families who voted for him? They work with people who voted for him. They live next to people who voted for him. How should we deal with those neighbors, co-workers, family members?
Well, first of all, we have to remain passionate about protecting these most vulnerable people. You're absolutely right. If this new president does half of what he says, there will be so many of them in danger.
I love this guy, Jonathan Capehart. He says, how can we even look at our disgusting mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and children who voted for Trump? And he's speaking to an Episcopalian bishop. And the Episcopal Church, some of my best friends are Episcopalian or were, but they're pretty lib. They've gone pretty lib in recent decades. And so the Episcopalian bishop, he says, well, the most important thing is we have to remain huge libs. We can't for even 1 second consider not being huge libs. We have to remain passionate in our leftism. And then he goes on to try to answer the question. But what's the answer? I think that there are people, maybe including Jonathan Capehart, who are asking this question sincerely. I have family members, maybe I live with someone who voted for Hitler, for super duper Hitler, the threat to our republic, who hates the Muslims, even though the Muslims voted for him, and who hates black people, even though 1 in 5 black men voted for him, and who hates Hispanics, even though roughly half of Hispanics voted for him, and who hates women, even though most married women voted for him, and 40% of women under 30 voted for him, and even single women moved in his direction, who hates all these people. How can I live with these family members? And I guess the answer is, maybe you should try to understand them. Some on the left are going to say, I do understand them. They're idiots, they're uneducated, and they're filled with hatred. That's what they're going to say. I understand why people voted for Trump, because they're bitter, clinging, Bible-thumping, gun-loving, rube idiots filled with hatred. That's what they're going to say. Many people, that's the Obama explanation. Times of crisis, people, they cling to their guns and religion. That's such a stupid answer. It's so uncharitable. And it's just wrong. You don't think, okay, fine, you hate the caricature you have of a Republican. You hate the white people, you hate the men. Okay, well, why did a lot of Hispanic women vote for Trump? Why did black men vote for Trump? Why did young women, why did women under 30, why did 40% of them vote for Trump? Why did the Arabs vote for Trump? Why did the Muslims vote for Trump? How about you explain that? Some Democrats have. They've come out and said, well, yeah, because Hispanics are evil now and black men are misogynistic and Hispanics are racist. And, they just apply the usual playbook to now their previously favored racial groups. However, I think there's maybe another answer. Maybe it's that the left's understanding of Trump, the left's understanding of the Biden-Harris administration, the left's understanding of the state of the country is just wrong. And maybe that's just because they believe the press, and the press has been caught in many, many lies. Maybe that's why. Maybe this is why I said personnel is policy. It's the most important thing that Trump can really focus on. because there's no, the president himself doesn't have time to do everything in the administration, doesn't have time to do very, very much of anything at all. It's a huge job. So you got to get good people into those positions. You got to focus on important areas of policy. Well, you really got to focus on the press. You really got to focus, because we all talk about how the press has no power anymore. The press has a lot of power. Jonathan Capehart, the people who listen to him, and I think he himself, they believe the press releases that they put out. They believe all this. And for low information voters, they're going to turn on the news maybe for 5 minutes once a week, and whatever they hear, that's what they're going to believe. So you have to have people in the administration who know how to handle the press, who understand the press's language, who know how to not get caught up in the lexical prisons that the press sets out. It's that great Trump tweet, despite the constant negative press, covfefe. The constant negative press is a big issue. It can divide families. People are not going to come to Thanksgiving because of the lies of the press. Good Trump policies could be stymied because of the lies of the press. Got to make sure you focus on that. We've cracked their power. Elon has done a good job with that. The podcasters and the streamers have done a good job with that, as the New York Times and the Washington Post have given us credit for. But you got to keep pushing. Got to get that through. Now, my favorite comment yesterday is from Denise NYC54, who says, pretty soon you're going to call 911 and the dispatcher is going to ask you who you voted for before they send someone out. Yeah, probably. Certainly if 911 were run by the federal government, if 911 were run by FEMA, they would. Okay, sir, we're getting ready to get an ambulance out right away. Just one question. You don't have a Trump flag in your yard, do you? Because if so, those ambulances are going to take a few days to dispatch. I mentioned just now this amazing statistic that just came out of the Associated Press from exit polling. 40% of women under 30, according to the exit polls, voted for Trump. 40% of women under 30. I know, the trains are as shocked as I am. I think I'm sitting in the middle of train tracks here in Iowa. I was here in Iowa last night giving a speech. 2 lots of young people, men and women, people of all sorts of races, most of whom supported Trump. And that's because the people who didn't support Trump were standing outside in great numbers, screaming at me and yelling all sorts of things. I think we'll probably have a video coming out on that too. But inside, I saw the same kind of thing that I saw at Madison Square Garden, at the Trump rally, that I've seen in the whole MAGA movement. A great diversity of people who are typically associated with Democrats supporting the conservative. 40% of women under 30. Wow. How do you make sense of that? That was one of the most rock-solid groups for Democrats. Well, I think the way you make sense of why 40% of women under 30 vote for Trump is the same way you make sense of why 1 in 5 black men vote for Trump, why almost half of Hispanics vote for Trump, why an overwhelming number of Arabs and Muslims in Michigan vote for Trump. Because they have not been served by the Democrat Party. Because that has been clear. Because things have become so egregious. Political circumstances have been so crazy, that was the subject of my speech last night in Iowa, that the press was not even able to lie about it effectively. I think that's why. You think about women in particular, young women in particular. How many young women are on depression drugs? Huge swaths of American women, down to teenagers, up to women of a certain age, but including women in their 20s and 30s, are prescribed very heavy depression drugs, SSRIs, happy pills. Why? Because they're depressed, because they're anxious, because they're stressed out. Why is that? Because women have been lied to since they were in grade school. Because women have been told not to get married. Women have been told not to pursue relationships. When they do pursue relationships, women have been told to only have casual sex, promiscuous relationships. Women have been told to put career first to the exclusion of anything else. Women have been told to delay having kids. Then when they really want kids, they realize things are getting a little bit late. They've been told to go freeze their eggs. If they do get pregnant, they've been told to abort their babies. They've been told to do all sorts of things that make them really, really unhappy, which might help to explain why in surveys of women's self-reported happiness over the past 40, 50 years, women's happiness has declined in absolute terms and relative to the happiness of men. Maybe because the women realize, young women in particular, realize that liberalism isn't working for them. To say nothing of the kitchen table issues. They see that their costs have increased 23% over the last 3.5 years. They see that it's more dangerous now for them to walk down the street in cities that were supposedly safe. They realize that if they want to play a sport, they might get their skull cracked in by dudes who have been put into that sport by Democrats and liberals. They realize liberalism isn't working for them, and so they've changed course. Because contrary to what the libs and the Democrats would have you believe, women possess reason. Black people possess reason. Arabs, Muslims possess reason. Hispanics possess reason. They're not just NPCs. They're not just automatons who are owned wholesale by the Democrat Party. They are responding to changing circumstances. And Democrats have allowed circumstances to degrade incredibly for lots and lots of people. Now, Charlamagne, he's the radio host of The Breakfast Club, which is predominantly to a black audience. Charlamagne was just in an interview with ABC with Jonathan Karl, and he was asked to venture his view on why 1 in 3 non-white voters went with Trump.
Most people, they just care about keeping food on their table and keeping a roof over their head. And I think sometimes people forget about that. I think that they forget about, the working class. And for whatever reason, Donald Trump speaks to the grievances of the working class in a real way. And I keep telling folks, people will forget what you did, they'll forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Okay, hold on. He just said 2 things that contradict each other. The first one, I think I agree with. The second one undermines what the first one. First one is he says Trump speaks to the grievances of the working class in a real way. And then he says, they'll forget what you did, they'll never forget how you made them feel. So in the first one, he's saying, no, Trump has a real connection to the grievances of the working class. The second thing he says is, Trump's just all boasting and he's all rhetoric and he's all empty promises and he's not really connected to the real grievances of the working class. He just makes people feel good. Which is it? I think it's the former. Yes, when a politician can make you feel good, that is helpful and it inclines you to vote for that politician. But if the politician doesn't deliver the goods, that's not going to last very long. And Trump has been at the highest level of politics for almost 10 years now. So I think that's a total cope from the libs. I think that's a total cope from Charlamagne. Oh, Trump just makes these aggrieved people feel good. No. Go back to what you said the first time. Trump has a real connection to the real grievances of the working class. And I think Charlamagne here is saying this. I don't want to read too much psychobabble here. I don't want to read his motivations and what he's saying. But I think the implication is that that's somehow a bad thing. The grievances, these aggrieved people. He speaks to that. That's usually how that term is used in politics. Trump is just playing on people's grievances. People voted for him because they're aggrieved and they want to send their grievances all the way up to Washington, D.C. It is good when politicians respond to people's grievances. That is their job. We have a right in our Constitution to redress our grievances. We have responsive government, a democratic Republican government, so that the government is more responsive to our grievances. And the working class, along with other groups, have legitimate grievances under the Biden-Harris administration. And Trump has real responses to that. Here's one grievance. Our borders open and illegal aliens who work with cartels and satanic gangs are pouring over the border and committing crimes and raping people and murdering people. Trump wants to close up the border. It's a real response to a grievance. We have out-of-control inflation because of Joe Biden's stupid spending policies. Donald Trump wants to change that. Okay, that's a real response. People are afraid that we're on the brink of World War III because 2 major conflicts have popped off under Biden-Harris. Wouldn't have popped off under Trump, and Trump's already resolving those conflicts. The day after Trump's elected, Hamas says, I want to end the war. That's a real response to real grievances. Now, the government is not dealing with any of that stuff. The government is instead focusing on really, really important issues, like 80,000 pounds of butter that have been recalled by Costco for the dumbest reason imaginable. We will get to that tomorrow. We don't have time right now, baby, because I'm about to get hit by a train wherever we are in the middle of Iowa. It's Tuesday, so we will get to that in the Membrum Segmentum. The rest of the show continues now. You do not want to miss it. Become a member. Use code Knowles, KNWLES, at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.